Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi, 1 week at a time. This is Masechet Zevachim. We are starting a completely, not only a new Masechet, but also an entirely new Seder, which means that we are actually entering an entire new world. So as you can see from the slide, we're going to be talking about animals, about sacrifices. So I wanted to give a brief overview, just so that we can understand what we're talking about. We are entering the world of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temple, and we have to understand that for hundreds of years, the way to actually worship Hashem, God, and also, unfortunately, other gods, was through sacrifice. Sacrifice being generally animal sacrifices, but we will talk about other things as well. Now, I think it's just important as we enter this world, to acknowledge that it is foreign to us. This is not something that we do nowadays, and something that I think many people completely disconnected from. But I think it is important to recognize and to understand what Judaism looked like in the time of the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, or the tabernacle, the Mishkan in the desert. The center of the either the country, the nation, the camp in the desert was the temple. And the way we served God was through sacrifices. Also, just to give us a historical understanding, right? We have a Mishkan, a tabernacle, in 39 years of the desert, 14 years when they get into Israel in Gilgal, 369 years in Shiloh, 59 years in Nov and Giv'on, till we have the building of the temple of the Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem. David, it was his dream to build it, but only his son Shlomo builds it. The first temple stands for 410 years and then is destroyed. There's an exile for 70 years. And then we have the second temple for 420 years. So just to get an idea, this is over 1,000 years of temple worship. We have to understand that sacrifices can come from animals, meaning sheep, goats, oxen, right, cows. Also, they come from birds, as you can see from this beautiful slide that they made for me. Okay, we're going to discuss different parts of the sacrificing process, the sacrificial process, but it is important to understand that the essential part of what's called the avodah, of the service, is the application of the blood on the altar. Generally on the altar that was on the outside. I'll show you a picture in a minute. And it's not necessarily the burning of the meat. I think many times when we picture sacrifice, you picture take an animal, put it on the fire, and it burns up. That is not the way it was done in the Beit HaMikdash. And the Torah tells us that it's the blood that brings about the atonement, the kapara. Okay, right? And only for a small amount, for many sacrifices, only a small amount of the meat is actually burnt on the altar, on the mizbeach. Most of the meat is either eaten by the kohanim, the priests, or by the owners. And we'll go through each one of the sacrifices. So let's start with the animals. Again, this is all an introduction. The animals that could be brought are either an ox, a sheep or goats. And we'll see that there is a difference between male and female, the age, right, under a year, over a year, that all of those things are very important. I think, just also as an aside, this Masechet is going to be filled with many details. And again, in the Beit HaMikdash, details matter. I don't want to say however, but I think it is also important to recognize that we don't get too distracted by all of these details, and recognize that the process that we're going through is a way to connect to God. So I just want to put that out there as an introduction to sacrifices, that yes, as we'll see in the Beit HaMikdash, precision and details matter, but I don't want us to lose sight that it isn't really about that animal. It's about what it symbolizes. So I think that that's just something that is important. Okay, let's talk about the animal sacrifices. Again, really, in short, the first one is a chatat, which is a sin offering. It is, again, the blood is going to be put on the altar. The meat is burnt, and the Kohanim will eat part of that sacrifices. The chatat can be personal or communal, and it is brought when someone does something bishogeg, accidentally, not on purpose, right? If you do a sin on purpose, you do not have the luxury of bringing a sin offering. Next is the korban olah. The olah is a burnt offering. It is fully burnt on the altar. Asham is a guilt offering. It is similar to the chatat, but it is only personal. There is no communal asham. Shlamim is also called a peace offering. It is voluntary. The meat is eaten primarily by the owner who brought the sacrifice in Jerusalem. Korban Todah is a thanksgiving sacrifice. It is voluntary, and again, the meat is eaten by the owner, and it comes with 40 loaves of bread. Okay, next, the Bechor. Bechor is the firstborn animal of a cow, sheep, or a goat that is a male. It is given to the Kohen, to the priest, and it is brought as a sacrifice and then eaten by the Kohen in Jerusalem. Maaser. Maaser is a tithe. All the animals that were born in the same year are put together in a pen, and every 10th animal is maaser. It is like a shlamim, brought as a sacrifice. And the last one is Pesach, right? The Korban Pesach, which we've learned about in the past, is brought obviously on Pesach. Next, we then have bird offerings. We have a chatat ha'of, that is a sin offering, that is a bird. This is eaten by the Kohanim. It is not burnt on the altar. Only the blood is placed on the mizbeach, on the altar, but the animal itself is eaten by the Kohanim. Olat ha'of, this is a burnt offering, but that is a bird. This is voluntary, and it is completely burnt. It is completely burnt on the mizbeach. Okay, that was animals, birds. Now we have plants. So things that grow. A mincha is a flower offering. It could be communal or personal. It's usually mixed with oil and frankincense. We have what's called nesachim. Nesachim are libations, wine that is brought with a korban, usually shlamim or olah, and it's poured into a section of the mizbeach. Oil, as we said, is brought with the mincha. Frankincense, levona, is brought with the mincha. It is also brought with the showbread, the lechem hapanim. The ktoret is the incense that was burned twice a day on the inner mizbeach, and wood is used to fuel the fire of the mizbeach. Okay, we also have two types of sacrifices. Again, we've mentioned all the sacrifices, but they can be split up into two groups. The first is called Kodshei Kodshim, which means, holy of holy. These are sacrifices that are only eaten by Kohanim or burnt completely. The next category is called Kodshei Kalim, the kal as in light. These are less holy than the first group, and these are eaten by the owners who bring the sacrifice. Okay, three more things. One, what is the service? What is the avodah that is done with each animal? The first thing is what's called smicha. Smicha literally means to lean on. A person is going to lean on the animal that they brought and do what's called vidui, where they atone for their sins. And just to think about it, the idea is I'm transferring, my sins, my culpability, my thoughts, my feelings onto this animal. The animal is going to go to the altar, and I am going to get atonement. So that is the idea of smicha. Okay, then there is what's called the avodah badam, the blood service. What does that mean? This is four things that are done with the animal. The first one is it is slaughtered, which is called shchita. The next one is what's called kabbalah. You catch the blood from the animal into a vessel. Then we have holacha, which means to bring the blood to the mizbeach. And then we have zrika, which is where they sprinkle the blood onto the altar. So these four actions are going to be very important in this Masechet. Then the next thing that's done is burning what's called the emurim, which is like the inner parts of the animal. That's burnt on the altar, on the mizbeach, and then whoever's going to eat the meat is going to eat the meat, either the kohanim or the owners of the animal. Okay, what I would like to do now is just show you a drawing of what the Beit HaMikdash looked like. This is a very beautiful I happen to really like this drawing, except that in my head it is backwards, because if you look on the bottom it says Safon, which means north, and on the top it says Darom, which means south. So look at this picture, but then I'm going to do the next picture, which I flips it, because this is the way I think about it. The top of the screen, the top of the picture is north, the bottom is south, the right is east, and the west and the left is west. Meaning when you walked in on the right-hand side where it says number 12, that was the entrance into the courtyard of the temple. You are walking from the east side to the west. This is number 6 is the women's courtyard, where there were like offices there. You went up the 15 steps. That's number 9 on your screen, right in the middle. You went up the 15 steps, and then you walk into what's called the Azara, which also is the courtyard. Number 14 is where Yisrael, anybody who's a descendant who isn't a Kohen or a Levi, could be in 14, in that thin area. Beyond those steps, only Kohanim and Leviim could walk. Just to, again, for us to understand, number 23 is the altar, the Mizbeach. It had a ramp, that's number 24, a ramp going up towards the fire that is at the top. At the north of the Mizbeach is 22. Those are rings that were in the courtyard, and that was where the animals were slaughtered. Then we have number 27 is the kior, that is the water basin. That is where the Kohanim would wash their hands and feet. 28 are the stairs going up into the building, what's called the ulam, into the inside of the Beit HaMikdash. But from 43 to 46 is what we call the Kodesh, the holy, where you have the gold, 40, hold on a second, 43, yeah, oh, so interesting. Okay, no. 46 is the gold Mizbeach, but it's supposed to be where number 43 is. It's on the east side of the room, and then on the west side of the room should be 45 and 44, which is the candelabrum. The menorah is 44. 45 is the shulchan, where it had the lechem hapanim, the showbread. Then there was, either depending on the first or the second temple, either a wall and a curtain or just a curtain. And then 47 is the ark, the Aron Habrit, which was only there in the first temple, as we saw in the last Masechet. It was then hidden and not there for the second temple. So that is just an overview of what the Beit HaMikdash looked like. Okay, and with that, I think we are going to begin our class. If anybody has any questions, feel free to write in the chat, or you can always email me. Okay, the first chapter is going to discuss intentions of the people who are bringing the sacrifices. And we're going to learn, so we're just going to see just three topics or ideas. The first is the concept of lishma. Lishma means doing something for its own sake, right? So if you're going to bring a korban for its own sake, that would be lishma. If it is lo lishma, it means you didn't bring it with the right intention. So then another phrase is l'shem ba'alim, which means you're bringing it with the intention to bring atonement for the owners. The Baal means the owner of the sacrifice. The last thing we're not going to talk about today is what's called pigul. Pigul means someone, a Kohen, who has basically wrong intentions. Either to sacrifice or eat the meat past the allotted time, and that invalidates the sacrifice. Okay, with that, we are going to begin Daf 2 of Masechet Zevachim. So the Mishnah tells us, all sacrifices, if one of the actions, one of the service, remember we had 4 services from slaughtering to putting the blood on the altar, if one of those actions is done shelo lishma, meaning without the proper intent, it is still valid. However, it doesn't count for the owner's obligation, except for a chatat, a sin offering, and the Pesach. Pesach must be brought in the right time, meaning on the 14th of Nisan, and a chatat can be brought any time. So to an asham, if a korban a sacrifice is sacrificed for something more holy, so then it is valid. If it's sacrificed for something less holy, it is invalid. An olah, a burnt offering, if you had in mind that it was a shlamim, meaning the wrong sacrifice, it is invalid. However, if it was a shlamim, right, which is the hold on, not Thanksgiving. How do you say shlamim? Peace offering. If it's a shlamim and the kohen had in mind and thought it was an olah, that's a higher level, and therefore that would be okay. All right. Next, if okay, so now the Gemara explains that and a bechor and maser also. If it had intention for a shlamim, that would be valid. However, the opposite would be invalid. So now the Gemara explains, you can't have any other wrong intentions, meaning if you did one of the four actions with the wrong intention, so then if the rest of the actions were with the right intention, then it would be valid. Okay, then just so we should also understand that in this Masechet, we're going to bring a lot of verses that are going to prove the statement that we just made, right? So there's a verse that the sacrifice is like a gift, what's called a nidava, and therefore, right, if you did as you promised, so then it's valid. And if you don't do as promised, so then it becomes a nidava, just a gift. But so it's a valid sacrifice. It just doesn't count for your obligation. Okay, so we know that there's the wrong intention and the right intention. What if what's called stam? What if there was no intention? The Kohen wasn't thinking about anything. So then that does count for the person's obligation. It's as if it was done lishma, with the proper intention. But for a get, right, for a divorce, if the divorce document was written stam, meaning without the intention of it being for the person's wife, it would be invalid. So the Gemara asks, why is there a difference? Right? One would think you need the right intention. Here's the wrong intention. Either they should both be valid or both invalid. The Gemara says no, because for a sacrifice, stam, meaning when I'm not thinking about anything, it is already lishma, because when I separated the animal, I said, this animal is going to be an olah. I already designated it as a sacrifice. Therefore, if I don't think of anything, it stays as that sacrifice. Whereas for a get, that is not the case, right? The default is a woman is married to her husband. You want to change that reality, so now you have to have the proper intent. Okay, there are 6 things that the sacrifice needs to be, like the intention needs to be there for. It has to be the correct type of sacrifice for the owner that brought it, for Hashem, for the fire, for its aroma, for it to be pleasing to God, right? All of these things need to be in the mind of the priest, of the Kohen, when he is doing all of the avodot, all of the actions that he needs to do for that sacrifice. Now, the Gemara tells us that even if he didn't think of these 6 things, it's still valid, because the Gemara tells us that the court, the Beit Din, made a stipulation that even if someone has neutral intentions, their sacrifice is still going to be valid. Okay, that was daf number 2. Daf number 3. There are the Gemara gives different cases of a divorce, a get, that are invalid. And here are all the things that we mentioned, that if it's not written for the man's wife with the intention for it to be a divorce for her, then it would be invalid. And as we said, it's different than a korban, than a sacrifice, because again, the sacrifice does need intention, but if there's no intention, again, not negative, but no intention, then it would still be valid. Okay, next, the Gemara tells us that if like a chatat, a sin offering, was slaughtered and the Kohen was thinking that it was an olah, a burnt offering, that would be invalid. But if he was thinking that it should be, that it would just be chulin, like nothing, sorry, that he wasn't thinking that it was a sacrifice, then it would still be valid. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, what's going on? You're saying that if I had a different sacrifice in mind, it's invalid, but if I didn't have a sacrifice in mind, it would be valid. That seems to be, doesn't seem correct when we think about it. So the Gemara says that actually that would be the case, because intent for the wrong sacrifice actually uproots the intent for the original sacrifice, right? So the intent of another sacrifice can profane a regular sacrifice. So then maybe the intent of no sacrifice should also do that. The Gemara says no. A verse teaches us that, again, another intent for another sacrifice profanes this sacrifice, but chulin, right, not thinking about a sacrifice, does not invalidate that that sacrifice. Okay, now the Gemara we talked about changing the intent, meaning having what's called, in Hebrew, it's called shinui kodesh, which literally means changing the sanctity, right? If this is a burnt offering, if it's a sin offering, if it's a peace offering, all of those are different korbanot, different sacrifices. And if you had a different one in mind, it is complicated, right? And most of the time, it will invalidate the sacrifice. What about what's called shinui ba'alim? Shinui ba'alim means I maintain that this is a sin offering, but instead of being a sin offering for Sarah, it's a sin offering for Rivka, right? So that's called shinui ba'alim. What happens with that? So now the Gemara explains, if I have a chatat, a sin offering, with intent for the wrong sin, it's valid. It's a valid sacrifice, but the person does not get atonement for that. But if you had in mind, instead of it being a sin offering, that it was a burnt offering, an olah, that would be invalid. Another case, a chatat for the wrong person, right, is invalid, but for another person, but as an olah, as a different sacrifice, that would be valid, which again seems to be confusing as to why that would be. So the Gemara explains that, right, the verse says that when you slaughter the sin offering, it must be for that sin that the person brought it for. That's the only way it could be valid, and it must be for the person who brought it, right? If Sarah brought the sin offering, the Kohen needs to say, this is Sarah's sin offering, and then do the avodah, the service. Okay, Daf 4. We are now, again, we're going to bring a lot of verses going back and forth. A verse says that we need for the korban, for the sacrifice, to have proper intention. Again, lishma, proper intention. We learn it from the verse, V'im zevach shlamim, right? Again, if you sacrifice the shlamim, the peace offering, right, it teaches that you need to have the intention that it is a shlamim. Whatever sacrifice it is, you need to have the proper intention. And all the avodot, remember we said in the introduction, there are 4 avodot, 4 services that are done with the animal. Again, slaughtering, shchita, kabbalah, accepting the blood in a utensil, holacha, bringing it to the mizbeach, and then zrika, sprinkling it on the mizbeach. Each one of these 4 avodot is needs proper intent. So as we said, it's not only when you slaughter the animal, it is also when you do each one of the avodot. Okay. Okay, the Korban Pesach is unique, that it has to be slaughtered with the intent that it is a Pesach, and for all the people. If you remember when we learned Pesachim, we learned that each Korban Pesach is for a group of people. The Kohen has to have, or the person who is shachting the animal has to have proper intent to include all of those people in that sacrifice. Okay, well, then the Gemara brings a verse to prove how each one of the 4 services needs to be done with the proper intent, right? Collecting the blood, bringing the, sprinkling the blood, right? Again, each one of these is unique. Therefore, we can't learn one from the other. We need a verse to teach each one of these things, and that each one of these things needs to be done with proper intent. We also need a verse for the intent of the of that it's done for the person, the owner, the Baal, the owner of the sacrifice. Now here's just if we make a mistake, right? If the Todah, the Thanksgiving sacrifice, was slaughtered as a shlamim, which is the peace offering, right? The shlamim, that would be valid, but the opposite is not valid. And the Gemara explains basically that if one sacrifice, right, the Todah, is also called a shlamim. Because it's called a shlamim, it can be sacrificed as a shlamim. And again, that's not the ideal, but that is that it does not invalidate the sacrifice. Okay, the Gemara brings up a verse that teaches that the chatat and asham, the sin offerings, are eaten only for 1 day. Also, it is right. As we said, all the other services need to have the proper intention for the sacrifice and for the rightful owner. And there's a verse for each one of those things. Okay. Now what happens if the owner dies? So if the heirs bring this sacrifice, so there is an issue of having improper intent for this sacrifice. If it was a different, if they thought that it was a different sacrifice. But what about for the wrong owner, right? If it's for the wrong owner, again, that would invalidate it as well, just like for the wrong sacrifice, right? The verse says the sacrifice is to atone for him, right? It needs to be for that owner. Or maybe that verse is teaching that the owner is responsible for the sacrifice, and therefore if the animal gets lost, the person has to get a new animal. Okay. The Gemara then explains more sources, more verses that teach that proper intent is important. So daf number 5, if the sacrifices are valid, then it should bring atonement for the person, and if it's invalid, it shouldn't bring atonement. How could it be? Again, the Mishnah had said that sometimes we can construct a case where the sacrifice is valid, but the owner doesn't get atonement. So the Gemara wants to understand how is that possible? The term is miratzeh, right? From ritsui, from wanting, desiring. All right. How could there be ritsui? Right? How could we get atonement for the sacrifice? Or how could we not get it if the sacrifice is still valid? So the Gemara brings an example of a sacrifice that's brought after the owner died. That is still valid, right? So the example is, let's say, a woman who gives birth and she dies. Her heirs can bring her korban olah, the burnt offering. However, it does not give atonement to the person because that person already died. So what is going on here? So it's saying, right, what about, right, how could they bring her sacrifice, right? It says that this sacrifice must be done lishma, again, with proper intent. The chatat, right, the sin offering must be done with proper intent, but it cannot be brought if the owner died. Other ones can be brought even if there isn't proper intent, and this is the case where the sacrifice is valid, but there's no atonement for that person. Okay, let's talk about the korban olah. Right, the olah is a burnt offering. It's completely burnt on the altar. It is not brought for atonement. Therefore, it could be brought even with improper, again, even with wrong intent. We'll put it like that. Okay. Hold on 1 minute. But right, a chatat cannot, right, is invalid. Again, because it's a sin offering, it must be brought with the proper intent for the person to get atonement. If an animal, let's say an animal was set aside as an asham, which is a type of sin offering, and it was set aside to get a blemish, and then it was slaughtered. So if you didn't have any intent, so then it is a valid burnt offering, a valid olah. So now the Gemara goes back to our Yoledet, the woman who gave birth, and her children bring her sacrifice. Again, as we said, how could the children bring her sacrifice? She died. So now, they cannot bring the chatat, that's for sure. We're going to learn in this Masechet, I think even today, that a sin offering, a chatat, whose owners died, is not allowed to be brought. However, they are allowed to bring her olah. Now, the Gemara tells us, which we didn't learn yet, but the olah is actually an offering that will bring atonement for positive commandments that we did not do. And therefore, the heirs can bring the mother's olah, the burnt offering, to give her atonement for the positive commandments that she didn't do. Or another way of explaining it is that when they bring it, they're getting atonement from it. Right? And here there's a discussion is if the heirs acquire the animal from the parent, so then only one of the heirs can bring the sacrifice. Okay, daf 6. If a person receives atonement, he's the one who owns the animal, and he can do something called tmura. Tmura means where a person can transfer the sanctity of one animal, right, that is already sanctified as a korban, and can transfer that sanctity to another animal. However, it is important to understand with tmura that even though you're transferring the sanctity to another animal, the first animal does not lose its sanctity. And therefore, now you have two animals that have the same sanctity. Only the person who owns the sacrifice can do tmura, right? A person who does not own the animal cannot do tmura. Okay. As we said, right, the Olah is giving atonement for positive commandments that were done before this animal was designated as an Olah, right? The question is it bringing the question is what sacrifice, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. What sins is it atoning for? And the Gemara says that, right, either it's atoning for sins that were done before the animal was designated, or it can atone for sins even after it was designated, as long as it wasn't sacrificed yet. So that is a machloket. Okay. Next, the sin offering, the chatat, is separated for each sin that a person did, again, before the animal was designated. But again, so what's different is the chatat is for each, right? You need a different animal for each sin that you're getting atonement for. An olah will give you atonement for all sins in one animal. So that's a difference between an olah and a chatat. As we said, the atonement is from the blood, right? The blood that's put on the altar. And if you remember in the beginning, I mentioned the idea of smicha. Right, smicha is when a person leans on the animal and does vidui, right, atones for their sin. This does not, just doing smicha does not give the person atonement. So that's just important to understand. Also, the Gemara explains that there's two types of atonement. One for the person, that they're not going to get punished, and the other is for God, right? So, right, that God forgives everything that we have done. Okay, next, daf 7, the last daf for today, speaks about, let's say a person brought a korban, an offering to the temple, and, right, so we have Reuven and Shimon. Reuven's sacrifice was brought and slaughtered, but with the intent that this animal should have the sanctity of Shimon's animal, but it still belongs to Reuven, meaning the Kohen didn't get confused whose animal was which, but the Kohen said, oh, this animal should have the same sanctity as that animal. So the question is, does that work? So one opinion is that's still valid because the Kohen had Reuven in mind. Another opinion is no, it was invalid because not only does he need to have Reuven in mind, but he has to have Reuven's sacrifice in mind as well. Okay, the same thing with a korban todah, the Thanksgiving sacrifice, needs to be slaughtered for the owner and for the reason that the owner brought it. We're going to learn in this Masechet that the korban todah was brought for when a person was saved from something very dangerous, crossing the desert, crossing the sea, This is what we have nowadays. Is parallel is benching gomel, birkat gomel. Right, we thank God when we're saved from things. In the time of the temple, they brought a korban todah. So the korban todah needs to have the person in mind and what they're being thankful for. Okay, and then chatat, again, sin offering. If it was slaughtered for the wrong sin, but for the right person, right? It's still a chatat, but for Reuven, but instead of thinking about Shabbat, they thought about something else, right? So it was brought for the wrong sin. That still is valid because it's still the Kohen had in mind sin offering, chatat, and the Baal, the owner. So that is valid. A chatat for another person's sin is also valid, but if a chatat for another person's sin is invalid, and a chatat for someone else who isn't supposed to bring a chatat is also invalid, because the idea is you would think, oh, that person didn't need to bring a chatat, but interestingly, the Gemara says everybody has sinned accidentally at some point in their lives, and therefore that would make it invalid. The olah, right? If you sacrificed it, if you slaughtered it without the right intention, meaning lo lishma, if you do the rest of the avodot, the rest of the service properly, so then it is valid. The olah that's brought by the heirs can be slaughtered for somebody else, again, because the owner isn't even alive anymore, or no, it needs to be slaughtered with the heirs in mind, because they are now the proper owners of this sacrifice, and then it will atone for their sins. Okay, as we said, and the Gemara says again here that at the bottom of 7, the olah, the burnt offering, is a present for God, and it has to be that when it's brought, the person already did tshuva, the person already did repentance. I think it's just beautiful that we're learning about this right before Rosh Hashanah and right before Yom Kippur, right? This idea that we have to do our own inner work, and then we can do the outer work. Right? And then it says that we bring the sin offering before the burnt offering, the chatat before the olah, because you have to ask for forgiveness first, and then you can give a present to God, right? That's the order. Okay, now the Gemara is going to end for today about the Pesach, right? The Pesach has to be lishma. You have to have in mind that it's a Pesach. It has to be, and if it is, right, lo lishma, it becomes invalid, right? You need both, and it needs to be for the owner. All of this is based on a verse. If the Pesach was lost, and then you sacrificed a different animal, and then you found this animal, that's called motar Pesach. So then it can be brought as a shlamim, as a peace offering. All the avodot of the Pesach, all of the service of the Pesach need to be lishma, as we said before, for the Korban Pesach. And it is learned from the verse, right? It says, who, right? That the slaughtering, the shchita, needs to be lishma, and it cannot be lo lishma. Okay, with that, we are going to end for today. And I just want to take this opportunity to wish everyone a Shana Tova, a Ktiva v'Chatima Tova. May this be a year filled with peace, with bracha, with health, with happiness. So just wish everyone that. We do have a few minutes if anybody has any questions. I'm happy to answer them. And as I mentioned, I think I mentioned last time, but if not, for the next month, we're going to be meeting Sunday nights, just because, and we'll go back to 9 p.m. Just this week, I couldn't do 9 p.m., but we'll go back to 9 p.m. for the next, I think it's either 2 or 3 weeks, I don't remember, and then we'll go back to our regular night of Wednesday night at 9 p.m. So wishing everyone a Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. I'd just like to say that it's really lovely to actually participate live in this. I'm in Israel now, not in Australia. And yeah, I'm live, which is fantastic. Not a recording for a change. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Reverend Tamara. It's been a pleasure. And to know all of you, I know all of you, but you don't know me. Yeah.
It's so nice that you could be here. I was wondering how you were managing from Australia. So it's nice that you are here. Helen has been learning with us, I think, from the beginning. Is that true?
From the beginning.
Wow.
5.5 years now. Yes.
Wow.
It's been a real pleasure, real treat. I just wish my father was around to witness my learning. Yeah.
Israel, and I'm so glad that you were able to participate live. That is so exciting when people could be together in the class. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Which city in Australia?
Melbourne, and I'm very happy not to be there right now. It's not a great place for Jews, not a great place for an attitude towards Israel. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here and a relief to walk the streets here and to be with my people and my tribe. And we have a lot of family. My husband and I have a lot of family here as well. So yeah.
Wow.
Shana Tova.
Okay. Shana Tova to everyone. And it should be a good year. Be'ezrat Hashem.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Shana Tova, everyone. See you Be'ezrat Hashem next week.
Bye.
Send a class reminder, please.
Yes, I will.
Okay.